whenever you go, then you have to have all your facilities. So like with Lord Ram, that's why he told Sita that don't come with me because the forest is very austere. So Radharani said, well, that's the only way I'm going to go, and I'm not staying here behind. You have to take me with you. So he said, all right. So due to Radharani's mercy, that Krishna sent Govardhan Hill, sent Yamuna, sent all of Braj. So because of Srimati Radharani, that we became very fortunate to have all these holy places that we can manifest, that we are able to see the Lord's pastimes and able to engage in devotional service. So anyway, whenever Krishna comes, he would send all his associates, he would send all his ministers, just like when the president of the country would go somewhere, he would send his entire entourage, all his ministers, and set up everything so that he can come visit. So Krishna also did like that. So when he sent all the demigods, he sent all the devatas, he sent all his whoever is needed for him to perform his pastimes. So he also sent two Vasus. One is Drona, and the other is Dara.
Term that's used to describe the pastimes of the Lord by people from India. It was the first time I actually encountered that, because for the most part, the first 16 years I was in a movement, I distributed Prabhupada's books, mostly to Americans, in American airports all over the country and parking lots. So I wasn't exactly sure how to deal with this. So then I started researching this a little bit. There's a book written by Satsang Maharaj called Readings in Vedic Literature. This is a book that he felt was required when he started, he was overseeing a library party where devotees were going all over the world and distributing Prabhupada's books to university libraries. So in his role as a leader of that party, he would address different classes in theology and religion, and also classes in Indology. And he was surprised to find that what was being taught in the universities around the world, they didn't accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they didn't accept these pastimes as anything other than nice stories, as fiction. Well, now, where did all that come from? I mean, this is being taught in universities worldwide. 10 years ago, devotees started the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. This is in Oxford University, which is one of the most prestigious universities in the world. And in these 10 years, 18 ISKCON devotees have gotten master's degrees or PhDs, and some of them are now professors in major universities throughout the world. And this was an attempt to kind of churn around this understanding that was not acceptable by Gaudiya Vaishnava acharyas. Just the opposite of what Srila Prabhupada has taught us, what his guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who established Gaudiya Mass all over India, very, very strongly taught. So where did it come from? Now, we can go back to the time when the East India Trading Company entered India to try and bring economic development to England from India, and just basically to exploit the Indian populace and the Indian resources. This goes back into the 1600s. And then in the late 1700s, there was a man by the name of Sir William Jones, who was the first Indologist, the first person to study Indian spirituality. And he was the first president of the Asiatic Society of Bengal. Okay, and he wrote these incredible, I mean, he was very scholarly, he learned Sanskrit, he started to translate the ancient Vedas, but he had an agenda. He was Christian. And his agenda was to put Vedic presentations into disrepute. So he described the Mahabharata as simply fictitious, something that no man in their right mind would accept. Very, very heavy. And, he was under the employ of the East India Trading Company. So it became more and more pronounced. At first, when the British entered India, they had a very conservative strategy not to in any way denigrate Indian spirituality. But that soon fell aside. And Christian missionaries started proselytizing. Their strategy was to print literature that would denigrate and put doubt in the minds of the Indian populace about the veracity of Krishna's teachings, the veracity of the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, the Srimad Bhagavatam. So these were the first Indologists. And as Britain continued its policy of imperialism, both economic and political, social and spiritual, it became more and more pronounced. So that the rational intellectualism, of the late 1900s became the predominant mentality of the Indian intellectuals. They were all trained by the British, and they started thinking along these lines, that this is actually mythology. What Dhammaraj was speaking, and this is very prominent, and then there was, what's his name now? The Bengali that attended the World Conference of Religion in Chicago. Vivekananda. And so, to kind of, the philosophy that he presented was actually went along with this modern Western understanding of Indian spirituality, because his bottom line, I'm using American colloquialisms here. I mean, you're becoming used to this now. You're all here in America, right? The bottom line was that the demigods, the gods and goddesses, were actually just put into the Vedic literature so that people could get some kind of a handle on the inconceivable, to bring it into a perspective that their finite minds could accommodate. And this became very, very popular throughout India. This is monism. And, a pretty big defect in this, however, is that, and he would preach, develop love for God, but love means that it goes between two persons. How can you love something that's not a person? And there's a reciprocation. It also comes in love. You love someone, and that person loves you back. And this is what develops in the relationship between the devotee and Krishna. So then Bhaktivinoda Thakur, also at the same time of Vivekananda, he started studying the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he was also an educated, in this period, as was our Srila Prabhupada, the Scottish Churches College. And they were hell-bent, on undoing this paganism, as they referred to it. So this contamination, this misunderstanding that was propagated by the British, and they actually hired intellectuals to come to India to tear apart the faith of the Indian populace. And to a large extent, there was some success. So that the philosophy that Vivekananda propagated became held in the highest esteem by the educated classes in India. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur recognized this and gradually started introducing to the intellectuals in Calcutta, which was the economic headquarters of the British. Then the communists took over and they drove it into the ground. So, everyone moved to Bombay and Delhi, other big companies. And, the communists did everything they could to stop ISKCON in Mayapur. Really heavy, the tactics that were used. They blocked, the Temple of Vedic Planetarium. And it wasn't until the communists were removed, they were revealed as the big rascals that they had become, that the Temple of Vedic Planetarium in Mayapur is coming up in a very unprecedented rate. So, I've brought up some really provocative points, I think, probably to all of you. Now let me just stop here and maybe we can digest them a little bit. Does anybody have any comments? Does anybody want to throw a tomato at me? Or any challenges, any questions about what I've said thus far? Well, I think at this point, yes, go ahead. Is there a microphone, or can everybody hear? You have a loud voice.
Yeah, I have a loud voice.
Okay, that's good. You're a successful man, I think.
My question is, you mentioned that the British Empire, Colonial Empire, they try to destroy the Hindu religion, or they try to influence the Christianity in the Indian mob. What is the motivation behind that?
Well,
they came purely for economic reasons.
Yeah, there's an American expression, I don't know if you've heard it or not, but this is a dog-eat-dog world. Okay? In other words, when someone is in material consciousness, I use this example, I'm a teacher in Mayapur, there's treating himself as the center of the universe, and we have many examples in history. Look at what Adolf Hitler did, to pursue his means, or even Stalin. Stalin killed 20 million people. Why? To become the supreme personality in the USSR. The Islamic Sikhs, they killed 9 million Hindus in Bangladesh, at the time of partition. So it's not unusual for someone to, in order to get the sense that they're in control, they're in power, to put other people down, to suppress them. And it's a standard practice in capitalism, to subjugate people. And this is why, this is why communism, at least this is what the historians say, why that developed, because kind of counteract, the capitalist attempt to exploit and just use people for their own economic means. But we're getting a little bit into, but the philosophy 727, Ichadvaisha Samutvaina Dvandva Mohina Bharata Sarva Bhutani Samhoham Sagayanti Parantapa. Overcome by the dualities of desire and hate, the living entity enters this material world. Originally we were all in the spiritual world, but somehow or other we desired. Here's this little blue boy playing on a flute. He's the cynosure of everyone's love and affection. He's got all of these gopis that are just totally in love with him. Why can't that be me? Icha. this desire to be the supreme person, and a concomitant envy. That little blue boy, oh, he's not so good. I'm actually much better. This sets us up. These are the primal psychological motivating forces for the jiva in the material world, conditioned by the modes of material nature. This material nature comes from Krishna. It's Krishna's energy. He provides facility for the jiva who wants to forget him and try to enjoy separately from him, to have his little Goloka Vrindavan with his Radharani, to play act as the Supreme Lord. So the British, they were just simply play acting as the Supreme Lord, and they felt their way was better. This is what the Supreme Person does. He dominates, he controls, he's the Ishvara. So this is the power of illusion. So make no mistake about it, the British, they weren't saintly in their attempts to subjugate India. They used very, very devious methods for doing this, and they denigrated Indian spirituality to subjugate the Indian people. They started Christian schools all over India, Christian colleges. They encouraged people to, come to the colleges, and they were taught that the law of karma was bogus. Prabhupada, he speaks about this when he was at Scottish Churches College. That it's this inferior spiritual understanding. That Ananta Rupam, that Krishna comes in many forms. And that there's deity worship. Thou shalt not worship graven images before me. They consider this idolatry. A very, very heavy assault on the Indian populace by the British. And very, very intelligently arranged. Initially, they didn't want to do this because they figured there would be revolution, which eventually there was. But the damage that was done to the Indian population and the understanding of their tradition was enormous. Now we have Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, just presented Vedic knowledge as it is. And Srila Prabhupada did the same thing. There's 70 million of these in print in 90 languages now, Bhagavad Gita. And 70 million. I'm saying that because that was one of my sales lines. I would say there's 60 million in 80 languages 15 years ago, or 16 years ago, or not, 20 years ago. I'm going to be an old man. 20 years ago when I was daily going out to distribute these books. And I just know that there's many more books that have been published in 20 years, so I'm guesstimating, another at least 10 million. And another 10 languages. This translation's going on all the time. This has changed the lives of millions and millions of people. You're all IT professionals. Right now, in the last 10 years, 15,000 IIT graduates across India have taken up Krishna consciousness. We're going for the very cream of the Indian intellectuals. These are IIT graduates. 5 years ago, I heard a figure that 90% of IIT graduates leave India at the time of graduation. And if they come to America, they're considered so qualified, their starting salary is $250,000. I don't know if that's valid or not, but this is what I was told. I've been out of America for the most part. Last time I was here for any length of time was 7 years ago. But the point is, this does appeal to intelligent people. We don't have to accept the bogus propaganda that the British imperialists laid upon India and devastated their faith in the most powerful tradition. And what am I doing up here? You're probably wondering. Here I am, American. What am I doing up here talking? I'll tell you how I became a devotee. It's just the most powerful experience. It's just, the first day I came to a Krishna conscious temple, I never left. It was so miraculous. So just like, what Dharmaraj is describing, these pastimes of the Lord, they seem superficial, supernatural, something beyond what a logical person could accept, right? I mean, you have strong, logical, mathematical intelligence. There's the Amachitra Katha comic books. Okay, are these pastimes coming from that? Is it in the same category? Or is this something that we can actually accept as the absolute truth? Because in order to go back to Godhead, in order to escape the entanglement and the illusion of material energy, Prabhupada describes, or Krishna describes in the 4th chapter, 9th text of Bhagavad Gita, we have to understand Krishna's appearance and pastimes in truth. This is our qualification. We actually have to enter into this type of understanding. How do we do it? It's another realm of reality that, Atashi Krishna Namadi Nambavadrayam Indrayani Sevan Mukhehi Jivado Swayam Eva Spiratida. With our blunt material senses, we cannot perceive Krishna's name, his fame, his pastimes. It's not possible. But when we render devotional service, then Krishna reveals himself to us. There's one American scholar, his name is David Haberman. He was a professor, he maybe still is, at Williams College. This is where I went to school, Williams Amherst Wesleyan, up in the Little Three, up in Williamstown, Pennsylvania. And he describes that these pastimes, he describes a shrine in the mind, okay? That people through meditation experience these different pastimes, but they never really took place from a historical standpoint. He's a very, very respected scholar. They're just carrying on from what the original, just like Darwinian evolution. Practically every serious biologist sees incredible holes in Darwinian evolution, but it's still being taught in the schools because, this rational intellectualism that was the norm of the day amongst intellectuals throughout Western Europe, and then that was imported into India, that became the accepted norm. And this is the way Indian spirituality was first studied. It could have been studied from a different standpoint, but it wasn't. So that momentum has carried to the present day. And so this is what the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies is trying to undo. And they're becoming very successful at it. Any course that's now taught at Oxford University is under the supervision of the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. And it's all run by ISKCON devotees who've been trained by Srila Prabhupada to understand that this actually is, these aren't fictitious mythological pastimes. Chigache? Anybody from Bengal? Nobody's from Bengal. I can't speak Bengali to you then. Huh? I know about 5 words. Okay.
You can speak and translate.
Okay. Tigachi means, is that all right? At least something like that. Okay, any other questions or points?
Can I say?
Yes, Prabhu.
Sometimes perception is weightier than reality.
Well, that's generally speaking how Western thought goes. This is the empiric process. And there are 3 major pramanas, proofs in the Vedic tradition. Pratyaksha, which means sensory perception. Okay, from sensory perceptions comes anuman, which means one theorizes. For instance, Darwin made many observations and then he created his Darwinian theory of evolution, right? So that's anuman. According to the Vedic tradition, the highest platform, the highest authority, the highest proof of knowledge is Shabda Praman. And that comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead who created the whole material world, who created you, created me, and is controlling it all, although we may not fully realize that. And that's the knowledge that is contained in Bhagavad Gita. And it may seem to contradict with pratyaksha, but pratyaksha is not, lacks validity because there's 4 defects of the conditioned soul. Karna patava, he has imperfect senses. You know, I mean, everybody knows that. I gotta wear glasses, without them I can't even see you. You know, and there's so much distorted reality that comes from that. So that's there. Okay, then there's pramada, which means one is subject to illusion. One is thinking that he's something that he's not. He presents himself as something that he's not. And then, let's see, the cheating propensity, vipralipsa, heavy. I mean, who can you trust? Because there's so many people out there that are just trying to rip you off or, give you misinformation. It's very, very difficult, very deep-rooted in the heart of the conditioned soul. What have I left off? Let's see. Who's in Anupatava? Brahma. Not Lord Brahma, but Brahma. It means we are subject to making mistakes. So this makes the validity of pratyaksha praman very low. And you can see this. Like, for instance, when I would distribute books, I'd be in the biggest airports in America, like JFK or O'Hare International in Chicago, and I'd meet someone, we'd start laying their scientific thing on me, and say, how can you accept this? This is all like, you just like, this is some, psychological delusion that you're going through, that the mind is just coming from the brain, you should be a little bit more logical. And I tell them, sir, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but this airport, there was no architect, there was no construction engineer. One day, there was a huge explosion, and it appeared. And there were headlines in the New York Times. Did you see those headlines? That's how JFK appeared. There was a huge explosion. Did you see the headlines? Do you believe that? Well, what about the Big Bang Theory? Come on, Bubba. It's crazy when you really examine it. Big Bang, and then we get these high, JFK, they've got, all these sophisticated plumbing, electrical systems, computer systems. Now, what to speak of the human body? Much more complex than JFK is. One human body. And there's no intelligence behind it, no construction engineer.
That shows that, them restricting themselves by not believing this.
That's it.
Shows their insecurities, because they're just limiting themselves to their understanding, logic.
But we have to be careful not to be influenced by that. You've all gone through the educational systems in India, and there's a lot of momentum that was established by the British.
So why did they fall for it?
Well, why does anybody fall for the illusions within the material world? Because Icha Dvaisha Shimotvaina. We want to be Krishna, we want to be God. So when we're really honest with ourselves and look at the situation, I'm a tiny part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. I want to reestablish my relationship with Him, and then there's a process to do that. It's not something you can just snap your fingers and get out of the illusion.
You talk about one of the most civilized nations on earth, India, right? And here you have the British, who are practically living on trees,
Yeah.
and they would come and just conquer. So this is the gap that we're trying to.
There's it's pretty amazing, how Kali Yuga functions. There's a description in the 11th canto, 5th chapter, that this is just, there's a famous verse which predicts the Yuga avatar, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. Krishna Varnam Tusha Krishnam Sangho Pangrashta Parshadam Jagnai Sankirtana Pr Yajanti Hi Sumedasa. In the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Krishna, who's not blackish, who's accompanied by his associates, his weapons, which is his bodily beauty, and his confidential companions. And after that, there's a description by, in the verses of the Bhagavatam, and also the acharyas go deep in the commentaries, that the suffering in Kali Yuga is so intense that people are forced to take shelter of chanting the holy name. And when they do, they come to the highest levels of God realization. And it's described that the sages in Satya Yuga worship Kali Yuga because the Yuga Dharma is so powerful that people are elevated to the highest platform of Krishna consciousness. In Satya Yuga, one can only come to the platform of Dasya Ras. It's the Astanga Yoga process. They're meditating upon Super Soul, and really it's, one is in Shanta Ras, one just meditating, not even having a serious attitude, just kind of like meditating on the Supreme Lord. Then this Dasya Ras awakens, but by the practice of Bhakti Yoga, as presented by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one can enter into the intimate pastimes of Krishna and Braj Leela. Madhurya Ras, Sakya Ras, Vatsalya Ras. Powerful. And, we're, in many ways we're so disqualified in Kali Yuga. We're so disturbed, so crazy. We're put in situations like we're work in America, we're separated from our family, our bosses, you have no idea that God even exists. They're, it's just like wacko. They're kind of disorientation. But, Prabhupada describes that when we chant Hare Krishna, it should be in the mood of a child crying for his mother. Now, every day your son cries, am I right, Prabhu? Every day he cries. And he cries for his mother, and it's intense. From his heart, with all of his life energy, he's screaming, Mommy! And this is how we need to cry to Krishna. Please, Krishna, engage me in your service. But the prompting from the material energy, the hellish conditions that come in Kali Yuga, facilitate that cry. So the British dominating, taking over these low-class, people coming in, stripping India, of its resources, and attempting to denigrate an understanding and a faith in their spirituality. It sets the stage. Bharata Bhumite Hoila Manusha Janmayara Janma Satakakara Para Upakara. Okay. He's a para upakara, he's concerned about the welfare of others. So he wants the people of India to go all over the world and spread Krishna consciousness. And so this is a plan of the Lord, that these, and Prabhupada says in the purport to this verse, this is, 7th chapter of Madhya Leela. Look what one man was able to do by going outside of India and spreading Sanatana Dharma. Now the leaders of India should send intelligent young men all over the world to preach Krishna consciousness. So these IIT graduates, there's been 100,000 participants in this Discover Yourself seminar that was developed by Radheshyam Prabhu, who's the temple president in ISKCON Pune. He's an IIT gold medalist with a master's degree from IIT Mumbai. Naistiki Brahmachari, super bright, I'm a good friend of his. He developed this seminar. 1 lakh IIT students have taken this in the last 10 years. Out of that 1 lakh, 15% decide to become devotees. Out of that 15%, 40% decide to become brahmacharis, and the other 60% work under a counselor and enter into the Grahastha ashram and become very dedicated to Krishna consciousness.
What was his argument?
Well, I never took the seminar myself, He just, he's an engineer, so he's just hitting people, knowing, how they've been influenced, and letting them to understand, because they're intelligent young men, and letting them understand that there's a higher reality, and your purpose in life is prema pumarto mahan, to develop love for Krishna, not to make a big money, and just, come to America, make it big, and then what's the purpose? I'm American, I went the other way. Okay, we gotta wind her down. I never told you I became a devotee. Maybe next time I come to Tampa. Okay, it's really a miracle in itself. That's why it gave me so much faith. Okay, any other questions? We got 10 more minutes, huh?
10 to 15.
Prabhu?
My question is, like, we have birth and...
Nice and loud. I'm an old man. I can't hear very well.
A little closer.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah. We have birth and death, right? If we don't have first birth, so there is no more death. Like, what is the...
Okay, you have to speak a little louder, Prabhu. I can't quite hear.
Hello?
Yeah, that's not. You have to be a little louder.
Just speak really loud into the mic. And it will work. Fine.
Hello?
Yeah, a little louder.
Yeah, just nice and loud.
I can
There is a,
one.
there is a, like, birth and death, right? So, if there is no birth, there is no death. So what is the reason behind the birth and death?
First of all, if there is no birth, if we don't have to die, he's asking the core philosophical question: why there is birth and death and.
Okay. That's a good question because we've all got to go through it, right? And it's not a pleasant experience. Those of you, how many of you are over 60 years old? Okay, so you and I both know, Prabhu, it gets tougher, right? I mean, the body starts wearing out. We get these telltale signs that the end's coming, and it's very sobering, right? I mean, one system after the other starts shutting down on you, and you say, wow, this is heavy. I never thought it would happen to me. Ah! So, why does Krishna put us through this? It's a very, very powerful experience, to go through. I'm 63. I remember it was not very long ago when I was 5 years old. Now I've got a son 21 and a one 18. And they were just born. It just goes so quickly. So why? Excellent question. Atato Brahma Jignasha. These are the kind of questions that will bring you back to Godhead. It's a super good question. Why does Krishna do this? Why does he make such an arrangement? Well, somehow or other, we misused our free will and opted to leave the most pleasurable and relishable position of situated as Krishna's servant. So then Krishna, out of his love for us, arranges this situation in the material world where we can play act. Like, you can go to Walmart. You have children, Prabhu? No children, okay? So, let us take the example of Shravanananda Prabhu. Okay, he has 2 daughters. So, he, takes them, sometimes Yoga Maya gives her mother a really tough time when she's trying to cook. Okay, she's pulling on her sari. Just Yoga Maya, Shanti, Shanti. Okay, so Shravananda, a very intelligent manager, he goes to Walmart and buys Yoga Maya a toy stove. Okay, and toy pots and pans, so that Yoga Maya can play on the stove and leave her mother, some peace of mind so she can cook her meals. Okay? So it's like this. We weren't qualified, we had this desire to not serve Krishna. We wanted to be Krishna. We wanted to have a separate existence, to try and enjoy separately from him. So this whole phantasm, we got our toy stoves, we got our toy cars, we got everything, all this kind of illusory sense that we're the Ishvara and the enjoyer. And so we have an opportunity in the human form of life. This world is described in Bhagavad Gita as Dukkalayam Ashashvatam. It's a miserable place and it's very temporary. It's designed that way. Krishna's designed that way. Why? So that we'll again use our... He can't force us. He just arranges situations where we just begin to turn to him. So I've noticed that life is quite a beautiful experience. You start, you're young, you got all kinds of useful energy, you got all these optimistic dreams to enjoy. You may be not thinking so much of the Supreme Lord when you're young. So you try to enjoy, you play with the material energy, you get burnt. It sobers you. Then you pass 60 and you realize, hey, I maybe got 25 years at most left, and they're going to be tough years because my body won't work very well. No chance of enjoying very much. I better turn to the Lord, get really serious because I'm going to be out of here soon, and I really don't want to go through it again. So it's actually a facility that Krishna provides for us so that we can take shelter of him. Does that make sense? Are you sure? We're all going through it. If we handle it right, it's the last trip, in the sojourn. The last time we got to do the birth and death routine. But if we really want happiness, the best way to achieve that is to reestablish our relationship with Krishna. And it's very, very, very deep, very, very profound. And as we go deeper into that relationship, it becomes more and more satisfying. And that's why, advanced Vaishnavas, they give up, the material pursuits completely. They're just not interested in it, because they got such deep satisfaction. Vishaya vinivartante niraharashadehina vasavarjam rasopyasya param drisva nivartate. You get a higher taste. That pleasure comes when we dedicate our lives to pleasing Krishna, then we're deeply satisfied. This is the reciprocation and love that Krishna gives us through his Ladini Shakti. Okay? So I think my time is up. I hope I haven't offended anybody, and I'm hoping that I haven't disturbed anybody. But what I would like to ask each of you to do, okay, this is... I found that one of the most exciting and pleasurable experiences that I've ever had in my entire life is to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. Why is it so pleasurable? Because Krishna is very pleased by that, because he wants all of us to go back to him as soon as possible. And the means to do that, and why Srila Prabhupada, his biggest contribution to the world is his books. This is our qualification. We increase our qualification to develop love for Krishna by our faith in and knowledge of Shastra. This is what Rupa Goswami, who was Lord Chaitanya's empowered representative, just in the beginning of chapter 19 of Madhya Leela, Madhya Leela 19, Krishnadas Kaviraj says, just as Lord Krishna empowered Lord Brahma from within the heart with Vedic knowledge, Lord Chaitanya empowered Rupa Goswami from within the heart with Vedic knowledge. So, what I'm going to ask each of you to do, because I care about you, I'd like to see you become extremely happy and not have to go through this birth and death again. And I make a humble suggestion to each one of you, because when you're like just smiling and you're not like gritting your teeth because you just work 16 hours behind the computer to make a deadline, right? You know, they go, you know. Not that that's not okay, but you can also do this in such a way that you can actually be in complete bliss. Okay, there's a very scientific method. It works. I also work hard. Okay, so what I'd like each one, how many of you have this? Please raise your hand. Okay, all of you that haven't raised your hand, please get one tonight and put at least 10 minutes a day in with it, for starters. You'll see a marked change in your life. Okay, next question. How many of you have children? Please raise your hand. Okay, now I need help from somebody. Lalji Prabhu, can you stand up and hold up a Krishna book right there? Yeah. How many of you have that book? Okay, a lot of you don't have that one. Okay, so what I'd like to ask each of you to do is get that book tonight. I don't know the financial arrangements, so that's not my business, okay? That's, I don't think, it's going to kill you. You're making good money here. And give money to Krishna, you're all the better for it, right? So take that with you, and please read it to your children on a regular basis, so they don't become Americans. That's a lousy joke, I know. But we want them to become pure Vaishnavas and achieve life's ultimate goal. Okay, and they need to hear this, and it's not mythology. This is coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's perfect and complete. And it purifies the heart of this tendency to enjoy separately from Krishna. That really works, believe me. I've been at it for 35 years. I've seen amazing transformations. I run a school. I started a school in the year 2000 in Mayapur. It's the largest Shastric training institution in ISKCON. And we have devotees, hundreds of devotees coming every year to study Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. And they spend 3 months there. Their lives are completely transformed in that 3-month period. Amazing results come from it. It will work for you too. I know it's, this is something you grew up with Amachitra comic books. But this is the real thing, written by the most empowered acharya in the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. He spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, something that no one thought was possible. And he did it because of his deep love for Sri Krishna and Sri Balaram and Srimati Radharani and the order of his guru and the previous acharyas. Okay, so please do this for yourself. Don't leave tonight if you don't have both of those books, okay? I'm humbly requesting you. This is the grand finale of the presentation tonight, because you can take it with you and you can keep nurturing your love for Krishna in the privacy of your home. After you got a migraine headache for 16 hours behind the computer to meet a deadline, you can just take Krishna book and chill out, as the Americans say. Okay? Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you. I'll go to Srila Prabhupada. What's next, Prabhu?
Aarti.
Oh, okay.